FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It is September 26th, 2017. Hard to believe, third quarter is almost history. And then we get into the fun month of October, where some not so great things have been known to happen in the markets. But, you know, when you're dealing with investing and you're making your plans and you're buying, you know, it's a lot like that song, The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold and when to fold and when to run. And someone who's an expert at that, helping you decide, is Kate Stalter. Kate, you are founder of Better Money Decisions, and you've been all over the place, seen you on TV, etc. Great to have you on the show, and thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, absolutely, Kerry. Very, very happy to be here. That's funny that you started out talking about October because, you know, we've gotten a little spoiled in terms of the U.S. markets over the past 8 years. And I think everybody's been kind of waiting for when this inevitable market correction is going to occur. And it will, because that's just what happens. But, you know, now with October just around the corner, that gives us one more milestone, if you will, to say, hey, is it about to happen now? Because October is historically not often a great month in the U.S. markets.
Oh, that's the truth. The crash of 29, crash of 87, and what was happening in 09, all bad times. Hey, by the way, I forgot to mention, email us at kl@kerrylutz. Any questions or comments? You know, I just believe that you need to be a contrarian, and stocks climb on a wall of worry. Nobody has liked this bull market, Kate, you know, since its inception, and
right?
They keep waiting for it to fail and waiting for it to fail. And you know what? They've been wrong for almost 10 years here, Kate. So it is getting old, though, and history isn't on its side as far as lasting forever. At some point, it's going to end, right?
Well, of course, it absolutely will. Now, one thing that's interesting, this is not the longest bull market in U.S. history. There have been some that lasted 12 years, 15 years. People forget as well. If you go back to the summer of 2011, there was a pretty big shakeup. That was the time when the S&P downgraded U.S. debt, but everybody forgets about that now because the markets rallied back so fast. Also, in the beginning of 2016, January, February 2016, we had some rocky times right in there. But, you know, there's so much we could say about this idea of the inevitability of bull markets and corrections. It's a normal part of the cycle. Markets actually do need to kind of refresh themselves. It does happen. But, you know, this idea that everybody sitting at home is kind of the armchair analyst, and just because your favorite guy on CNBC has made some prediction, you know, wait 5 minutes, some other guy is going to be on CNBC saying the exact opposite thing. I remember I was on a plane in about 2010, about a year after the rally that began in March 2009. The rally had been underway for about a year at that time. And there were 2 guys behind me. I don't think they knew each other. They just kind of struck up a conversation. And they were talking about, they were both agreeing that they had gotten out of the market and hadn't got back in. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, that's not really something to be proud of at this point. Because when you time the market like that, when you think, okay, I have a hunch, or my favorite guru says the market's going to crash, I better get out now. Well, maybe your favorite guru is going to be wrong. They often are, by the way, more often wrong than right. The other thing is, too, you got to be right twice. You have to be right when you get back in. So if you're going to play the market timing game like that, you got to be right twice. And, you know, in the pre-show chat, I mentioned to you the fact that back in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president, a lot of people believed, they didn't like him, they didn't vote for him, they had no confidence. And I'm not making a political statement here, Kerry, really just an anti-market timing statement. A lot of folks bailed out of the market when Barack Obama became president. Well, big mistake. because during the Obama years, and not necessarily attributable to any president, things just happen. But during his tenure, markets did very, very well in the U.S. Then we had another bunch of people. I'm here in New Mexico, where there are many, many people who oppose the current president. And they bailed out either in November when he was elected or January when he took office. And I've talked to a couple of those folks who are saying that they regret it now, too, because markets have gone up. It's the perils of market timing. So whatever is in the news there doesn't mean that it's something that you need to act upon when it comes to your investing.
All right. But, Wall Street is, if I had to come up with a 3-letter, not acronym, but it's the other thing that doesn't spell a word, I would say ABB for Wall Street. Always be buying, right? I don't ever hear Wall Street ever tell you to sell. What's your take on that? At some point, you're stupid not to take profits when you get these run-ups, and maybe there's times where you should get out of the market.
You should rebalance your portfolio. Absolutely. So I think the first question people need to ask is, my portfolio specifically tailored to my level of expenses, my life expectancy? More and more people are living to 100. It's crazy. The number of people living to 100 grew by 43% over the last decade, and it's still rising. The number of people living into their 90s is that much too. Biggest concern when it comes to investing and financial planning is not outliving your money. One of the things that I object to when people kind of read these Wall Street reports and are kind of, thinking, well, there's a guy at Goldman Sachs that says this. He doesn't know your situation. He's not your financial planner. His role is completely different. His role is to make money for Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or whichever big investment bank or brokerage that he works for. Doesn't mean that he has any particular insight. And I'm not picking on the guys. They're just usually guys. If a woman's saying this, I'd say the same thing.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that person has any particular insight into your situation. So yes, you absolutely. So to kind of come back to your question, Carrie, about do you want to bail out at certain points? That's the market timing. If you bail out, you got to be right again when you get back in, because there's a huge opportunity cost, huge potentially. And the other thing too is your portfolio tailored for what you need? This whole gamification of investing doesn't really apply anymore. It kind of evolved back in the days when Americans only had the choice of buying the large cap U.S. stocks. The world has changed. A portfolio of single stocks that you jump in and out of just because some guy on CNBC tells you that's a game. That's gamification. That's entertainment. It has nothing to do with your goals. How long do you want to live? Do you want to have money for your spouse after you're gone? What are the things you want to spend your money on? Do you want to leave money to your family? So many financial planning considerations that fall under the umbrella of investing. And it's like, I would say entirely, I was about to say 99%, I'd say 100% unrelated to anything they're saying on CNBC or Fox Business or Bloomberg. So that would be my advice on that count.
Yeah, so the talking heads on CNBC, whatever, whose interest do they really have at heart here?
Oh, that's a good question. It bears noticing who sponsors the financial media. Now, I do understand that journalistic organizations, I spent a long time as a financial journalist myself. I get this. They sort of have a separation of church and state, if you will, advertising and editorial. Now, to some degree, that's true, but you also have to kind of look and see, okay, who are the big sponsors of CNBC or Fox Business or any of these? I'll pick on them all equally, even the magazines, Money Magazine, that kind of thing. If you look at them, you say, okay, they're sponsors of big investment banks, big insurance companies, big broker dealers. Oh, and how about that? They sneak in people who represent those companies who get on there and talk to you all day long. You're not going to find any of the advice that you really need to make personal decisions for yourself, for your family on any of these channels. I don't object to watching it to sort of educate yourself if you're interested in what's going on. But the problem is it panics people. Yeah, I would argue that it panics people more than it gets them elated these days.
Right.
And that's just not a safe thing for all the reasons that I've kind of already enumerated upon today.
So going back, your philosophy here is to know your client's true needs, whether there's a spouse involved, children, and the goal of not outliving your money, which is a little bit scary. So what other rules do we have when working with clients here to help you achieve your goals?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that. Great question. It's everybody's situation is different. It really is. And a lot of it depends on your age. If you are at this stage of life, maybe you're in your 50s, 60s, you feel like I have several more years of work ahead of me, or you're thinking, hey, I have a potential retirement date in sight. That's the time to start looking at this. I mean, Carrie, I talk to all these people who say, oh, I'd love to slow down. I'd love to stop working, maybe retire at this age, but they're in their 50s or early 60s. They do not have enough money. I mean, that's part of what the financial planning process does. It says, wait a minute, how much do you spend? And you being maybe an individual or a couple, how much do you spend? What do you need? This whole idea that people cut their expenses in retirement, that's this really old school thing. And I've done some research into where the heck that came from. Nobody really knows. It just sort of became a mantra, if you will. And it doesn't even make sense because here's what happens. And I think you'll appreciate this. When, say, a person retires at, say, age 66, which is the full retirement age for anybody born before 1960. Okay.
Right.
Say that person retires. They're 66 years old. They're healthy. They have some money that they've saved up. They want to do some things. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to play a little golf. Maybe you want to visit family, experience some new things you never got to do while you were so busy working. That's a great time to do that, but you need to be sure you can spend the money up front and still have the money to pay for health care when you're 96 years old in 30 years. I mean, that's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it? That you don't retire at 66 and keel over a year later, and statistically speaking, that's really the case. So, if you need to factor in the things you want to do. One thing that shocks people in their 50s in particular, those born after 1960, is that people don't realize, the full Social Security age went up to 67 for people born in 1960 or later.
Correct.
And, a lot of people still mistakenly think it's 65 because that's the Medicare age. But you see kind of where I'm getting at is all of these factors come into play. Do you really want a mortgage in retirement? I meet people who have mortgages in retirement. And back in the old days, that was unheard of, absolutely unheard of. But today you see people going into retirement with mortgages. Now, maybe, depending on your income. And again, you see where I'm kind of doing a deep dive into some of the planning questions here. Maybe you do have a very high retirement income when you talk about your withdrawals from your IRAs and so forth, when you talk about Social Security, maybe pensions, maybe other forms of income you get that might put you in a still high tax bracket in retirement. And in that case, if you have the income, maybe a mortgage tax break is a good thing. But for a lot of people we talk to, they have these mortgages, and it's crazy.
Yeah, if you're in a high tax state like New York or California, and you've got the income and not a lot of other deductions, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense not to own a home in your old age as well.
Right.
From the standpoint of just keeping the household going, all the repairs, the maintenance, all that. So I guess everyone is different is what it comes down to. So, like I've heard, Kate, annuities being pushed mercilessly, foisted upon the public. And I know that they're not all created equally, that some might be right for you, some might not be, but it's a great way for the financial guy to get a big commission. What do you watch out for these things?
I'm so glad you brought that up. That is one of these things that for some reason, despite kind of having a bad name out there, and Susie Orman has talked a whole lot about variable annuities, and she's correct about those, by the way. Every once in a while, some of these gurus are right about something, and she is right about variable annuities. It's the variable part that I really object to in particular. There's some other nuances, but that's a good place to start. You're paying a lot of money for actively managed mutual funds, which tend to be expensive already. Often they have expense internal. So let's just start with the actively managed mutual fund. Very often you will find those where you have a manager somewhere picking stocks for you. Those will have an internal expense ratio often of above 1%. Now, I'm sorry, that's just obscene. There's no reason to pay for that.
Right.
The whole actively managed mutual fund universe, that's a whole different topic that I object to as well. But then when you take them and you wrap them into an annuity and then you put another fee on top of it. Now, I understand how these are sold. And I've met a lot of people who were sold these products after 2008, where the stockbrokers saw an opportunity and ran around saying to people, hey, if you don't want to lose your principal, if you want to guarantee this, then lock your money up into this annuity. Now, in some cases, if people feel like, hey, I need some external discipline, so I don't withdraw all my own money and incur the penalties. If I do feel better with something guaranteed, in some places, a fixed annuity could play a role. In some cases, that's not a bad thing, but this idea of these expensive variable products, and again, these are the ones that Susie Orman has talked about a lot over the years. We don't like these either. They're just it's an expensive way to own a bunch of already expensive, actively managed mutual funds.
Right. And what about these like no-load annuities? Do they get you someplace else? There's no free lunch. So if it's a no-load or low-load annuity, where they got to be making their money somewhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's always going to be a fee that the insurance company charges. Now, there are some products out there that are not so bad, but they're fixed or fixed indexed. So what you get is some kind of exposure to an index, not an actively managed mutual fund. And then you do get a guarantee on top of that of some percentage. Now, in some of those cases, those can be all right. They are less expensive than some of these variable products. In some cases, they have a role. Not very often, though. Not very often. There's some special situations. A lot of times when we meet clients who have, say, some of these just horrible variable products, they come in, the surrender charge period is up, and you don't want to withdraw the entire thing. You don't want to cash it out because then you would have a huge tax burden if you cash the whole thing out.
Right.
So instead, a better move would be to just roll it into a cheaper annuity product, some kind of fixed annuity. And then over time, you can start to annuitize that and create income. And yes, that income will be taxed, but not at the rate that it would be if, say, you were to withdraw like all 100,000 or 200,000 all at once.
Yeah, well, that kind of ties in with single premium life, because I guess you get to a certain age in life, they don't want to write life policies anymore. But, buying that single premium life can enable you to get income off of it, I guess, and pass it to your heirs tax-free with the insurance component of it.
Well, that's interesting because one thing that we have been doing lately, and the insurance industry, on the one hand, you could say, oh, they're a bunch of shysters, and that's somewhat valid. But on the other hand, they're smart. And they come up with the products that the public is demanding. And, I think everybody pretty much is aware at this point, long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
Talking about how people are aging that we've talked about today already here, Carrie. Long-term care insurance has become absolutely prohibitive. And a lot of carriers stopped writing those policies.
Right.
So what the insurance industry did to address that is they now offer long-term care riders with life insurance policies. And what's so interesting about that is you can turn on the long-term care rider if you need it. And then if you don't ever use it, you still have money left there that goes to your heirs when you pass away and you never used it. So it's not that use it or lose it thing that the traditional long-term care policies were doing, but it's a little better, and it does ease the minds of a lot of folks who are understandably and quite reasonably very worried about long-term care. And, this is something else. I think this also kind of ties in with the conversation about, watching all these television channels and focusing on the stock picking gurus. Are they going to help you with your long-term care decisions? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's not in their bailiwick for sure.
No. And I'm sure they take care of themselves, though.
Oh,
right?
Well, that's why they're in business. We all are.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so people who want to find out more about what you're doing, Kate, advice that you're giving, is there a place they can go?
Oh, absolutely. The website, and you already mentioned this, is bettermoneydecisions.com. And you can email me, Kate, Kate, at bettermoneydecisions.com. We also have a page on Facebook, so I would invite you to cruise over there and like our Facebook page. We post videos, podcast interviews, all this stuff. So would love to hear from the listeners.
All right. And as always, we'll have a link to Kate's site in the show notes to this interview. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feeds @KerryLutz, and the Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Kate, it's really been fun. We'll look forward to speaking with you again.
All right, Kerry. Thanks a lot.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.